Yep.
Hello, my name is Martin Lipscomb, and in this conversation I'm joined by my friend John Paley. John, once of Stirling University, is now busier than ever in retirement. His first book, Phenomenology as Qualitative Research, came out in 2016, and his second, dealing with concept analysis, should be released shortly. And this will be titled Concept Analysis in Nursing, a Critical Reappraisal. These works, in very different ways, tackle key issues and problems associated with nursing research and scholarship. However, both books in no way capture the breadth and depth of John's outputs, for while many scholars have written a lot and John's outputs are considerable, few have written so well or with such a sustained critical edge across so many topics. John is, without doubt, one of the most important scholars writing on nursing at the present time. John, welcome. It's great to have you here. Now, today I'd like to talk about a chapter that you wrote for my 2016 edited book, Exploring Evidence-Based Practice, Debates and Challenges in Nursing. Your chapter, Evidence and the Qualitative Research Analogous Structure, speaks to the status of qualitative research in nursing and also the place of this sort of research in nurse education. Specifically, you question the idea, an idea propounded by many nursing scholars and researchers, that qualitative research deserves equal footing with, or is in key respects on a par with, quantitative research. You also propose that simplified and possibly debased forms of qualitative research are encouraged and maybe even necessitated in many higher degree nursing programs. That is, you suggest that a lack of resource, time and support pushes many nurses undertaking research as part of, for example, a master's program to complete poor quality template or recipe-driven qualitative studies. And you describe this recipe using the acronym QRAS, and this stands for Qualitative Research Analogous Structure, which, as noted, forms the title of the chapter. Now, this structure aims to capture what many students are nudged to do. That is, students undertake, and here I quote, the retrospective description of experience and meaning through small sample interviewing, both data collection and analysis being carried out in the absence of theoretical preconceptions, with the implicit aim of inductively generalizing to a population while explicitly disowning the concept of generalization. John, please, can you outline your argument more fully than I have?
Okay, I'll have a go, and thank you, incidentally, for the invitation to do this. I have a long-standing interest in the history of thinking about method in qualitative research or research methods generally. So it's always a bit difficult knowing where to start a particular history. But if we think about the last 20 to 30 years, the idea is that the academic environment and the way it has changed in that time has exerted pressure on the kind of research that gets done. And the main instruments of that pressure are familiar things like the imperative to publish as much as possible and as high quality as possible, to expand postgraduate education as far as possible, latterly demands on tutors and researchers, which are basically administrative rather than anything else, and so on. And the argument is that this has led, in nursing at any rate, and I think for the disciplines, some of the disciplines as well, to the appearance of work in journals, which is done at master's level. I mean, doctoral level as well, obviously, but in particular master's level, which is an interesting development because the master's degree is originally supposed to be demonstration of at best competence rather than a contribution to knowledge, and yet here we have master's research appearing in journals. So that's one aspect of the history. Another is that, this is where the analogous bit comes from, is that as a result of this development in the academic environment, there has been a kind of evolutionary pressure, a selection for the environment has selected for certain kinds of research, and in particular it's selected for research which master's students can do which is obviously very limited because they have extremely limited time, they have very limited resources. These days, because there are so many of them, their tutors tend to be a bit either thin on the ground or short of time as well. So we're talking about very, very limited studies. And the kind of studies that leads to are typically small N interview-based studies, focusing typically on people's experience of whatever it is. I mean, patients' experience in particular conditions or processes, professionals' experience of assisting them and so on. And that has required, so we're now moving on to another level, methodological writing, or at least it's evoked methodological writing designed to justify that. Because what we've got now, master's level work, limitations of intrinsic limitations of that. We have studies which need to be justified because given the scale of the studies, you can't generalize. Given the nature of the studies, you can't identify or compensate for inferential error. And given the fact that the students concerned have nursing degrees or health-related degrees and haven't been exposed to research-intensive disciplines like psychology or sociology, you can't afford for them to be doing things which require a lot of digging into those adjacent disciplines. So the methodological writing that we've done in the last 20 or 30 years has effectively been designed to produce a series of justifications for this. I mean, it's not my word, but your word is debased research, limited research, I would say, extremely limited research, which, if it's going to appear in the journals and hence be regarded as a contribution to knowledge, has to be justified in some way. We can come back to the details. I mean, the thing at the end of the passage you quoted about with the implicit aim of inductive generalization while disowning the whole project of generalizing is, I think, an important part of the way that methodological thinking has developed. So that's the kind of overall logic of the argument. Obviously, there's a lot of detail involved in exactly what I mean by this, that, and the other, which you will no doubt wish to pursue.
Okay. I think in this particular format, rather going into the detail of the chapter, I'd just like to stay with the implications of the argument you're presenting. So I think the total argument that the lack of resources has nudged or pushed us to take up forms of qualitative research which are underdeveloped perhaps, and that actually these are finding their way into publication is really interesting. So if we accept that this or something very like this is occurring, what might the impact of the production of these types of study possibly have? And I'm guessing that this is the material which is beginning to be published for nurses at first and also higher degree level, the nurses who read the studies published in journals. And presumably the constrained form of education, this constrained form of education or education about research, presumably has potentially quite big implications for doctoral level study, because these are the people who will then go on to doctoral level work. Is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can trace a number of repercussions of this particular process. The first, I suppose, most obvious one is once you have those new justifications in place, which are capable of justifying or seeming to justify the kind of studies we're talking about, these very limited master's level studies, the genie's sort of out of the bottle, because once it's there, once you've got that in place, everybody can appeal to it. So the justification become discipline-wide, and people at doctoral level and beyond, postdoctoral and into their sort of research, nursing research careers, are drawing on the same methodological writing, and hence tending to do, not all of them and not all the time, but tending to do very similar kind of research. The second implication, I think, is that becomes a kind of cycle, because people, because of the history of the discipline of nursing in the university sector, it has been very gradually, quite slowly, emerging from a position of academic immaturity from its original, for its origins in the university sector, and very slowly trying to build a kind of strength and depth. But you still have lots of people doing doctoral supervision, whose own doctorate is actually quite recent, and who have really given their experience far too many doctoral students. I mean, I saw this at Stirling quite a lot. And because they're short of time, because they're short of experience, it's all very understandable. They basically want to stay in their comfort zone. And a lot of the time, and again, this is not something that's universal, but you do see quite a bit of PhD supervision, which consists in nudging the student into doing a study very like the one that the supervisor did, or her own PhD. So you have a kind of reproductive cycle of similar forms of research. So that's another ramification. And I think another one, something I've thought about a lot more recently, is the way it's having, I mean, it's not, I think there are a number of different threads to all of these things. I'm just picking out certain threads. But one of the things that struck me is that I think it's also having an effect on people's ability to read in an academic context. If the, in my view, and this is just a personal view, a lot of the methodological writing that's been in response to this is actually very weak. Some of it is worse than weak. It's actually, I think, in certain respects, it's incoherent. It doesn't actually make any sense. So I don't know if this is a paradox or just a straightforward consequence, but it would be quite handy if people didn't actually realise that. So we've we've also kind of lost an ability to read in a properly critical fashion. Effectively, this is sort of the evolutionary perspective, effectively in order to prevent people recognising the, in some cases, nonsense that they're being fed. And I think this has a number of manifestations at all levels. But I think my overall view is that we have lost a lot of the ability to read in an academic context. And part of that is, again, an aspect of the environment that's created all this other stuff, namely, we simply don't have time anymore because we've got too many other things to do. I'm saying we, I'm not in it anymore, sadly. But the pressures on people at that simple level, no time, no resources, and so on, are considerable in themselves.
Okay. Can I ask you, what feedback have you had, if any, in relation to this argument? Has anyone come back to you in an attempt to explain why they think you're mistaken?
No, I mean, in anticipation of something like that, I actually looked at the book. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at Google Scholar, the Google Scholar report on the book, but the number of citations is in single figures. That's for the whole book. I mean, I'm sure it'll get better with time, but and I just had a quick look at the citations that are included there, and none of them referred to my chapter. So the simple, straightforward answer to your question is no, there hasn't been any response. When I was kind of first thinking about this stuff, I did a number of sessions, teaching sessions, seminars, that kind of thing. talking about it, basically the overall argument that I've been outlining. And the response then was actually very encouraging. People, even if people didn't agree with it or like it, perhaps, I mean, or didn't like it, what I was saying about the implications, I can't think of an exception. I must have done this half a dozen times, and in every case, I mean, people said how jolly interesting it was. So that.
I've got a recollection of Roger Watson being very favourably disposed, but I might be mistaken.
I don't recall that one.
Okay.
Particularly, I'm thinking of stuff I did mainly in Scotland.
All right.
Before I left Stirling. So I think people find the general tenor of the argument, and I suppose there's a bit of a novelty in applying this kind of evolutionary theme to the academic environment and saying it selects this and that kind of research. People did find it interesting, but as far as I can tell, on the basis of admittedly in about 10 minutes of Google Scholar, there doesn't seem to have been much of a response in the literature.
Okay.
Well, I think people are far more bothered about the phenomenology stuff than they are about.
Okay. Well, I think what the things you said were very interesting, very thought-provoking. So just to round up, I'd like to say thank you for joining me today, and as ever, great to talk to you, John.
Thanks for the invitation. Great talking to you.
Good.